Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 49. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest, I was just telling him off camera when he booked his spot. This is kind of like 3.5 months in the making, and he's the one guest that I've been waiting to get to. So this is going to be a really cool conversation. I'll get out of the way. Introduce yourself, name, and kind of what you do, what you did.
Sounds good. I'm Kelley McKinlay. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. My life has been a dancer. I have been a dancer since the age of 3. And I guess I'm still a dancer.
Yeah. How do you, when I talked to you and you were like, I'm retiring after the show, but you've done it again since. So
it's one of those things where, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but retiring, it's like, you feel like a piece of you is missing because it's who you are. It's your being, it's your entity. But I think deep down, every dancer will always still be involved in some capacity, whether you expect to or not. Yep. It's just the way it is. But going back to the beginning, I was born in Edmonton, raised in Fort Saskatchewan, just outside of on an acreage. Large family, 4 brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. And we all did a million different things. My parents were huge advocates of exposing us to everything possible.
From sports to art to whatever, everything.
Yeah. It's funny. I always said, I didn't really come from, my parents weren't really artsy, but then I think back and my dad was the sewer of the family. He made wedding cakes for people. He made costumes, made tutus when we were a lot older, and for the dancers at the ballet school. So
is that weird? Isn't it interesting though? You didn't think that he was creative?
Well, that's the thing. At a young age,
what do you think of what? Like when you think creativity back then, you're thinking like painter, musician.
I guess I don't know. It's one of those weird things where it's like. I guess when you think your parents do things, it's they're just doing them. Yeah. You don't think of that.
The talent behind it.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah. I feel like all parents from that era did everything. Mm-hmm. They know how to do everything. I'm like, my dad works on a car. I'm like, where'd you learn that? He goes, I just picked it up along the way. Mm-hmm. Or, he knows how to build everything. Where did you learn that? I just picked it up along the way. Mm-hmm. I'm just like, wow. I don't know any of those skills.
It's lost now.
Yeah, it's so lost. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting growing up. But now that I think back, we were so immersed in it at home, Yep. And one of the cool things is that they put us into everything. I was really into competitive curling for a while, for about 10 years. Soccer was a big part of my life. It was, when I hit about 17, it was for myself. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? These are my 2 passions. I love soccer and I love dancing. What am I going to do? Spoiler alert, I chose dance.
and it was the right thing to choose.
Yeah, I've never looked back. Yeah. I've never looked back. Yeah. But it was so amazing growing up in a large family like that, because you always had the competition, friendly, non-friendly.
Where'd you
fit? Your brothers. I was the second youngest of the 5. I had a younger brother, older brother, and then 2 older sisters. Mm-hmm. We more or less all did everything. All the same things. My parents put my sisters into dance at the age of 3, and I guess every time we were at the studio, at the time it was the Alberta Ballet School, because the company was based in Edmonton at the time. And we I guess we're dancing around in the hallways to the music. So they were like, why don't we put the boys in dancing too? So all of us at the age of 3 fell into the dance scene as well. Mm-hmm. But from there went to theater school. I think I was the only one that didn't take singing lessons, but everybody took singing lessons. We all played multiple instruments.
No way.
We all, piano, of course, whatever it was. I played, speaking of Dowie, a good friend of ours, playing clarinet. I played alto clarinet.
No way. That's what that was like one of the first things you learned on, or that you had to like.
Well, when we were in band in school, that was what I chose. I have no idea why I chose that, but I did. Moved on to alto sax after that, because every kid wants to play alto sax.
Yep.
We were just immersed in so many things. As I got older, I did things like I took a watercolor class. So I painted for quite some time. My older sister went to Red Deer College for arts there, and she was in the theater program at Grant McEwen. And so, our life really was arts focused for sure. But then there was the other side where, at school, I loved sports no matter what it was. I was an athlete. Which is, I think, why dance was such a good fit because, as so many people, Albert Einstein, I think, said, they're the athletes of God. It's athletics on another level because there's so much more encapsulated into it on top of it.
Yep.
And so I think it was just a perfect fit. And every sport that I attempted or tried, I think, really elevated what I brought to dance, and vice versa. I mean, the dance training brought so much to the sport.
Yep.
My dad was a curler, so we all kind of fell into that. He was a firefighter as well.
Oh, he was?
That was his main
in
main
Fort
thing.
Sask?
In Edmonton.
Oh, so the reason that caught my attention, my dad was a fireman for 35 years.
Oh yeah, mine 36.
In Calgary.
Yeah.
And my kid brother's been on the fire department for 14, 15,
Amazing.
16.
Yeah. At one point, that's what I thought I wanted to do after I retired.
Which is, I'm going to interject all over this.
Yeah.
Which is crazy for me to think about my dad sewing anything or doing it like anything creative like that. Yeah. He built houses, so like creative.
Well, that's creative.
Putting things together makes a lot of sense. But like mechanic, yes. But like I can't. Your dad having the talent, patience to actually operate a sewing machine.
It's just crazy. I know. So he's a firefighter through and through, and my mom, obviously with 5 kids, was a stay-at-home mom. She worked, I think, at Eaton's before that. They just, drove us everywhere. Yep. It was one thing after another to another,
Non-stop.
to another. I'm so grateful. It's who I am today because of it, So I did all the sports in school and everything. I grew up in a very hockey-focused community.
Yep.
Hockey-focused schools. So, of course, being a dancer was
way
out of the ordinary, which...
Did you know that? Junior high, like in junior high, when did it like click that you were doing something off the beaten path?
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day, and I don't know why. Maybe it was on a run or something when your mind is just, random thoughts. And I was thinking about how there's different types of dancers out there. And especially in our world, or the world I was in, I should say, there's performers and there's like studio dancers. I've met so many dancers who would rather just be in the studio, taking classes, just working on their technique, and that's what they want to do.
Yep.
Whereas me, that is the boring part of the job. I hate the class. Practice. I hated. There's aspects of rehearsing that I love because it's just you can't do it. You can't be a dancer without that.
Yep.
But I lived for performing. I always did. I still do. And there was a time I always say I was around 10 or 11, but I could be wrong, where I was doing syllabus work, which is basically you learn a bunch of exercises and you work on them, and then you take an exam and they grade you on your musicality, your everything, memory, all that kind of stuff.
It's super intense.
Yeah,
like I know nothing.
Yeah.
You hear the stories about like just how intense it is and how precise it is. And
it's different in the sense when you're training because the intensity is more technique based. There's not a lot of personality. There's not a lot of performance. There's definitely performance when even in an exam, obviously you're still performing what you're doing, but it's just a different focus. And that to me was just like, I don't want to dance anymore. I'm so sick of this. So I think at that time was when my focus to soccer really started to blossom. I was on a pretty competitive team and had a great group of guys that, we were on the same team for years. And we really found our groove together. A really supportive group of guys for what I did. Growing up in school, I know how unsupportive I'd say the school system a little bit, but also the hockey guys were, because it was different, because I was
so different,
the gay guy,
so different, right?
Wearing tights for a living.
Yeah.
but yet we get into the sports and I'd run circles around them.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few pushing matches, nothing got out of control or anything, but, it was just, it was a good group of guys that really supported me through, and respected what I brought to the team and whatnot. So at that point, I really started to focus on soccer. My parents were good in the sense they were like, you still want to do this.
Were you good at it? Could at a young age, can you tell that, your dance skill set was above average?
It's weird. The dance world is weird because if you're a male, you'll succeed for the most part. If you can do the basics, you'll succeed. Mm. And it's sad because I don't want to bring down any male dancer because I definitely worked my ass off to get where I was. Mm-hmm. I did not take it for granted. I did not. I always put the work in. I always went above and beyond, whether it was outside of the studio for somebody else or whatever. But not to say that it is a million times easier for a male to succeed in the especially the ballet world than a female. Because that's just every little girl's dream. They want to be a ballerina. Yep. And so, I guess I thought I was good, but I was also, one of the very few dancers that was there to compare myself to. Right. There were certain years where there were a lot and I was able to, compare myself in the sense, but at that time, you're more thinking of improving and doing certain steps better or not. And I felt like I was good in soccer.
They probably like that team atmosphere.
Yeah,
be supported and just like that's a different thing.
And I think coming from a big family, you just you cling to that. You know, I'm not good being on my own. I get stir crazy. I was like, what do I do with myself? The only time I do is when I'm running. But then you're not. There's animals everywhere. Yeah. It's like you find things. It's
that running though. Do you find that it's since you retired, do you find it kind of cathartic?
Oh my gosh!
Has it changed since when you were working to when you were tired? Is the run different now?
Completely different. It's like I wouldn't say my happy place because there's times where you're pushing and you're just like I need to stop or but it's incredible the clarity you get from doing it. And the days that I do, I feel like I'm a different person right now.
What else do you work out in your head? Do you work out are you dealing with things from the past? Are you looking forward to figure out what's on your radar?
Everything. Definitely from the past as well. Yep. Whether I'm listening to music or not, I used to never run to music. I used to run just to the rhythm of my breathing. But recently I started running to music and of course you hear songs that bring you back to a time. You get a smell that bring you back to a time, depending on the type of year it is. And I always run, I live up in Evanston and I run just through some farmers, on gravel roads past farmers fields and stuff. So, growing up in an acreage, it's just so right familiar. And so it just takes you places. I picked it up again during the pandemic. Obviously being a soccer player, I ran a ton. But I stopped once I started dancing. So I picked it up during the pandemic and, at the time I was doing it just to stay in shape, which of course I am now too. But it was just, what am I going to do? I'm at home and I know I'm going to go back to dance. I have to do something. So that's, it was more of a, I should do this and get out there.
Necessity. And then it turned into something.
And then, once I stopped dancing, it really became something else. I'm not a type of person who's going to go, run marathons or anything. I don't have that I have a competitive edge, but I don't have the competitive edge in that sense, it's definitely more of just like spiritual is the wrong word.
No, but there's something to it.
Yeah.
Like it's when that clarity, because I feel the same way, like riding my bike every morning. If I can do something first thing in the morning, just kind of sets the table for what the day is going to look like and what the week looks like.
It really does.
But it's hard to, it's not spiritual, but it's like self-reflection that just kind of puts you.
It's big time. Yeah.
I love it. Like it's, once you're done, you're just like, all right.
I know that's the thing. I'm like, I'm slowly building up my distance and sometimes I'm like, that's it. But I know I can't push it, but I just I just want to go further and further. And it's not for the the end goal going, look at how far I ran, or I ran that far and I achieved something. It's more just for the experience of being in it and what you go through mentally. And yeah, it's bizarre.
Have you tried to figure out how to like, or maybe you're better at I don't remember. So if I go out for whatever it is, any duration, and the amount of thoughts that go through my head, and when I get back home, I'm like, fuck, what was I thinking?
I know. Yes, totally.
And I was thinking if I need like a mic that I get to talk to. Remember this, that I haven't figured it out.
So true. But you know what's interesting about that comment is even being a dancer. I mean, dancing under my same dear friend, boss, mentor, inspiration, Jean Gramet. He always said, if you come off stage and you don't remember what you did, he goes, that is the perfect place to be. You're just at one with everything that's happening. And I can probably count on one hand the number of times that actually occurred. You know, it's those special moments where everything is just where it needs to be. And there's definitely moments running that I totally feel that exact same thing. Yeah.
And
it's bizarre.
And there's some aha moments, like when you do get home and you do remember something, and you can almost see it and you work towards that plan, and it actually happens.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't need a business plan. I just need to ride my bike.
Yeah, it's so true. That's just so interesting. You get so worked up in so many things, and it's like, sometimes it's something as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you talk to so many people, and some of their best time thinking or best writing or best whatever happens at night when they're laying in bed and everything is just at peace.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a very similar feeling where your body is just in a state of being there or whatever, it's pretty special. Yeah.
I agree. That's why as soon as you said, I was like, I want to hear this.
Yeah.
So take me back. Yeah. You're 17-ish, you're playing soccer, you're kind of going down that path.
Yeah. And syllabus was still there, but not a big thing for dance. And I started to really enjoy dancing again because I was performing a ton. The school that I was in, they had a small little performing company that, because I was a male and, could do some stuff.
Somewhat athletic.
Yeah. I was in it.
Yeah.
And so we performed a ton. We toured a little bit, just around Edmonton and whatnot. And all of a sudden that love for it just blossomed again. And I mean, it got to a point where it was, okay, what am I going to do tonight? Am I going to do soccer? Or am I going to do dancing tonight? Because they were both every night of the week because it was that was the focus.
Yep.
And so by the age of 17, I really had to decide because I couldn't be, letting down the guys at soccer because of me just missing because I had another passion and whatnot. So, so I had to make that decision at that time. I mean, part of that also, I mean, funny enough, thinking back now, I'm sure every adult or every older person has done this. You go back, you're like, God, I wish if everything I knew now, if I was able to apply that back then, or the focus that I have has always been there. I just wish I used it back then,
Yeah.
And that goes to back to school. I mean, when I was younger, I was really focused and I did well in school. And then of course, as I got older, the focus changed. I was focused on dancing. I was focused on soccer, focused on curling. And my grades weren't great.
Yeah.
I had friends that helped me, push me through it, which I wish I did a little bit more of now, obviously. But
and why do you think that? Do you think it's like?
I mean, funny enough, I think part of it was like earlier I made a comment about how even the school system with my dancing. I mean, they were supportive in a sense where, I performed at school for certain things, whether they were celebrations or whatever. But I had a lot of teachers who, the hockey boys would go travel somewhere for a tournament and not a problem.
Yeah.
And, I'd be performing with the Alberta Ballet doing Nutcracker as a youngster, and
which is real deal.
Yeah. And he's missing too much school. It's like, yeah, I know, because my grades are slipping, but you can't tell me those guys' grades weren't great either, because I know they weren't. So there was just a sense of
it's like
lack of appreciation for what I did. And funny enough, thinking about school, the one memory, it was in high school. It was a career counseling course that we all had to take. And I remember we had to take this program. And we had to go through and I don't remember all the details, but we had to pick basically what we wanted to do when we.
Is this like comm class, career and life management?
Yes, that's what. Yes, thank you.
I think we're close to the same vintage, so I was like, I think that might be
that's what it was. Thank you. We're doing this computer program. You have to pick what you're going to do, and then you have to pick your, university courses,
which is ridiculous.
And blah 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 blah. And I literally sat down. I was like, "Well, I can't do this." And they were like, "Well, why not?" And I was like, "Because what I'm planning to do does not exist in your system. Like, I'm going to be a dancer." Wow. That was so what I had determined. I knew I was going to do this. So probably grade 11, grade 10, grade 11, something like that.
It's not early, but it's still to be that kind of black and white with it.
Yeah. And I was like, there's nothing in there for this. And I was like, I'm already doing my training. Like, once I graduate, like, my next step is getting a job. Like, there's no post-secondary dance. I mean, there is, but it's not a necessity or something that you do as a dancer. You do if you can't get a job, kind of thing.
Yep.
And she was like, "Well, you have to pick something if you want to pass this class." Well, I didn't do it.
No way.
I didn't do it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, you can't put all these children into a box and expect them to blossom.
Well,
I mean, I was always, and I think also my downfall in school was I learn by watching, by movement, obviously by my body. That's how my brain has always functioned, even as a kid. And I see that in my daughter now. Like, she's been, during the pandemic, was doing some dance classes online, and she would sit there and watch, and then she'd just do it. Mm. And I know dancers now that can't even do that.
Yep.
And that's just, how certain brains learn.
Yep.
I don't learn on paper. I'm terrible at learning lines and doing all that stuff. And reading books. That's why, tutorials of things, I'm like, just throw me in, I'll figure it out. It may take long, but I'll do it.
Do you think that in high school, like, being a creative, like a creative person just in general, that's being a dancer, two like big variables, wild cards back then, there was never going to be anybody who's going to be able to help you, put you on your path. Like,
I don't think so.
They weren't.
Maybe
they weren't
if
set
I
up
went
to do
to
it.
a specific school,
like
an arts school for sure. I mean, the ballet school that I was in was at Victoria Composite High School in Edmonton, which was a very arts focused school. But I was in small town Alberta, and I mean, yes, there was an art department, but just not the same.
Way different.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I feel like that's also part of it. I wasn't willing to put the time in to learn these skills and these things that I mean, now I wish I had, like I said.
You do? Like, you have a little bit of regret of what you think you might have missed out on?
Yeah.
Really?
I wish I put more effort into the sciences. I wish I put more effort into my math. I wish I'm not a strong reader. I wish I did better at all that stuff.
Yeah.
But my focus was my athletics and my dancing. And I mean, clearly I excelled at it looking back at where I've come now. But, I definitely wish I put more effort into it for sure. But the thing is, I think it took so much time for me to excel at that stuff because it's all book-based stuff. And at the time, my focus was like I said, on my dance. So anyway.
Squeak through high school, just kind of like finish it and be done, and where you go.
Yeah. I mean, there were times where I was like, I want to quit. I want to drop out because I was getting opportunities in dancing.
Yep.
I was working at training at the BAM Center. Is at the time they had a training program for kids, basically. So I went in 98, and that was my first summer. And I did what, nine summers there, maybe?
Oh,
I can't remember now. Over the course of my my time, and that was just so eye-opening. You're living on campus with all these other kids from all across Canada, making lifelong friends, and and they make it work like it's company atmosphere. So, I mean, I owe a lot to the BAM Center for where I've gotten, in the sense of I got my first professional job there. I was in grade 11, and Judith Marcuse, who used to have a contemporary dance company based out of Vancouver, came to the BAM Center and needed some dancers for a production that she was doing. And so I auditioned, got the part. and had to take 6 months away from school. And I did correspondence stuff on the road, of course.
Your parents were cool with it?
They were. But they were the ones that, and at the time I was like, I'm cool to drop out. And they were like, you're not dropping out. I mean, thankfully.
Yeah, you need that. At least that one piece of paper is probably just like...
You know what I mean? I'm so grateful that they did that. Yeah. But at a kid that age, you're so blinders. This is it. This is it. You know?
Which I think maybe kids at that age, maybe the blinders are up. It could be just so like just going against the grain. They might not be that focused, right?
Yeah, that's true.
There is something different about being laser focused at a young age versus being blinders up, not listening to anybody that's older than them because they're trying to figure out themselves.
Yeah, that's true. So I did it. I did correspondence and I toured the country with a group of people that, I mean, I was the youngest one. I was underage at the time. And they were all in their early 20s. Yep. I mean, that was the first time I was living away from home. First time I was kind of on my own, learning crazy things like public transportation,
like real things. It's not calm class,
things, you know. I mean, and I'm a type of person where I hate letting people down. I hate failing. And I know there's lots of people like that, but you know, that was a real learning experience for me. You know, I was living at this house with these amazing people. And I had some friends in Vancouver from the Banff Center days. And, you know, I'd go spend the night hanging out with them and then have to figure out how to get from their house out in Richmond all the way downtown to where we were rehearsing. And of course, you know, Google Maps wasn't a thing back then. So you're literally trying to figure this out on your own. And I mean, the amount of rehearsals I was late for, you know, Judith reprimanded me because I was always late because I just couldn't figure this stuff out. And, you know, I came from a small town. This wasn't a thing. But I also was just like, I think I was just finding myself, you know, I wanted to hang out with, you know, friends. I wanted to see what other people did. And so I grew a lot during that experience. But we got on the road. We all, you know, we had to find our own hotels. So a bunch of us well, you know, can't bunk out together. And I definitely grew up during that experience. You know, you learn how to work with money. You know, it's like, oof, I can't go blow all this money. And, which I did. And not like I was making a lot. It's still the arts, but you know what I mean? It's,
in and out.
Yeah, seriously. You know, I'm like, oh, I want to go buy this. I'm going to go buy that. And no one going to stop me. I'm on my own, you know?
Which again, I think that's why it's when I quizzed you on like the little bit of regret, like learning like sciences and math and stuff. I think there's like these lessons. I'm sure you're probably half decent with your money now because you probably learned
completely.
And there's some people that never could figure that, never have figured that out. So it's interesting. That's why I'm the same way. Hated school, creative person, wouldn't fit, couldn't figure out comm class because there's nothing. I wasn't smart enough to get into any university. So the more that I ride my bike, the more that I do these shows, I get to think about what I was up to too. And
that's just it. And you look back at the things you've accomplished, and it's like, I really have had a blessed life, you know, and I look back, and not that I see all these people that I grew up with, but I know a lot of them I don't think had the life that they expected to have. They were, you know, and I, not that I looked up to them, but they seemed to have it all together.
I agree.
You know? So I was touring.
And so what does that look like? 6 months? You know, is it 2 shows a week thing, depending on where you are?
So it was, we rehearsed, gosh, let me try to think now. Because we had to create the show. It was a pretty heavy topic. It was, Judith had done, I think, 5 years of research in high schools and other teen-based environments of things that teens were going through. And so it was based on teen suicide. The show was called Ice Beyond Cool. And it was pretty heavy. I mean, I had never dealt with or had to deal with suicide in my life, and I still haven't, thankfully. But a lot of the cast members had, and so there was always a therapist around to speak to us. And so once we finished rehearsing, we, I think, did about 4 shows in each city. We went as far east as Toronto. and then kind of moved our way back through all the hubs.
Yep.
And we performed in mall atriums because that's where teens tend to hang out. And so we would have shows there after hours in the mall. And there were some evenings where we would have our show, and the audiences weren't always big, but some of the smaller ones were the ones that were most impactful in the sense after we'd always have a talk back with the audience of the content that they watched, their own personal experiences with it. Because a lot of times the audience members were people who had either dealt with it themselves personally or had family members or friends or whatever. So in that sense, it was pretty heavy. I mean, there were some nights where we'd wrap the show and that was it. You know, there was nothing really to say. But other shows, we would be sitting there till 2, 3 in the morning.
It's a lot.
Talking.
Like heavy.
Super heavy. And I mean, as a 17-year-old, you would never imagine having somebody come up to you and be like, you saved my life. And you're just like, what? What are you talking about? I was just dancing. Like, I was just dancing. So it was a pretty, I think, important part of my growth as a artist. I wouldn't even say dancer, more as an artist. And I was working with actors. It was a cast of half actors and dancers, and so you learn so much from the people you work with, and I think I grew a lot from that experience. So that had finished. I went back to school, a different person for sure, and knew it was time to start looking at, where am I going to dance? What do I want to do? So I started auditioning around a little bit. Again, through the Banff Center, I had some friends who were, from all across Canada and even the US. And one of them was like, every year for the Nutcracker, Alberta Ballet in Montreal, they always need extra dancers. So why don't you audition? So I went and auditioned, and they hired me on as a guest artist for their Nutcracker season. And again, so I missed another 3 months of school. And lived again on my own in Montreal. And knew that this is what I wanted to do. Like at that point, you were like, it was like, this is it.
I got to figure it out.
Oh yeah. And so I did that. They had offered me a contract for the following season. But before they had done that, I was considering it for sure. I had been, Alberta Ballet was always a company I grew up watching. I did the Nutcracker for 9 years, I think, as a little kid. And I was like, it'd be pretty cool if I could dance for the company that I, trained in the school, grew up watching them. And so I was like, well, I'll audition because, you always want to audition for multiple places just in case. And so I auditioned for Alberta Ballet. They were in Edmonton. And funny enough, the show that they were touring with was a show, it was a mixed bill program. And one of the pieces was a piece by Wenwei Wang, who now runs Ballet Edmonton. And he had just won the Clifford E. Lee Award at the Banff Center that previous summer, and I was in his piece that he created there. And then Alberta Ballet picked it up, so it was kind of a special time that I was able to go audition during that time. So I ended up auditioning in Edmonton. At the time, I also knew that Mikko Nisanen, who was the director of the company, was leaving to move back to Boston and take over Boston Ballet. So they were going to have a new director. But I was auditioning for basically him because he was still the director at the time. So I when the company was in Edmonton, I showed up. I called and asked if I could take company class and audition, and I took 2 classes. Basically, after the first class, I said, nope, I'm not going to take my Legrand contract. I want to dance for Alberta Ballet.
What was it?
It was the environment. It was the
people involved.
Oh yeah, the dancers.
It was just
everything.
Like a family.
It was such a fostering environment,
cool.
and that is such a rare thing in the dance world. Now that I've come to realize, and Legrand was I had a great experience. I mean, met some incredible people, incredible friends. But it was not an environment that made me want to, sign instantly.
Yep.
It was one of those, who the hell are you when you walk in?
Yep.
You're in my bar spot. You're standing in my spot. To the day I left, I still had that same vibe.
Crazy.
And like I said, it was a great experience, great people. And I wouldn't, I'm so thankful I did it. But I took one company class with Alberta Ballet at the time and was like, I need to be here. Because when you're comfortable like that as an artist, I mean, that's when you can do what you can do best. Yep. When you're holding back and you're nervous, it's, what are you doing it for? So I made the decision right then and there that I was like, no, if I don't get the job with Alberta Ballet this year, I'll just train for another year and try again. And at the time, I had auditioned for a few other places and hadn't heard anything.
Are they like solo auditions or what are these?
No, so most people do, they'll call them cattle calls. And that's more of like a New York term. So the director will go out to multiple cities and they'll host a audition. Yep. So say, they'll go to New York and they'll go to a studio there, and people from all over will come and audition for that company that time. So, and it's to a point where they're from all over the world. And somebody random will teach the class. The director won't even necessarily know them. Okay. And they'll sit at the front of the room and they have to cut people as the class goes on.
So it's like a group. Starts off with a group and then just...
And they'll, wean it down. But most of the time in those big cattle calls, like, especially in the larger areas like New York or Toronto, you have to start cutting people right away, which is sad because I've still never understood the audition process for dance, because it makes no sense to me, because nobody's doing bar, nobody's doing center work, nobody's doing class. It doesn't show it can, but it doesn't show your artistry. So that's basically how you audition. I luckily didn't have to. So I called the company and was like, I'm based in Edmonton. This is your, Alberta Ballet has dual homes because the company used to be based there. And so when they came up, I just auditioned for the company, and which was odd. They weren't holding auditions in Calgary or Edmonton for next season because the new director coming in was based out of Montreal. So they were doing all the auditions on the East Coast. And I was like, they basically told me to do that. And I was like, but I'm here. The company's based here. Why can't I audition? So they said, yeah, fine. So they wanted me to send something out to the new director. And this is VHS time still. So I had to put a VHS together and mail it out to Jean. And I got a call not too long later from the executive director at the time, Ann Lewis, offering me a job. So I was, that's where I was heading. It was nice. I was still in Alberta. I was close to home, close to family. And started up that next year. I was fortunate enough to, luckily Jean had come. I was at the BAM Center again that summer working, and Jean came and officially saw me and met me in person. Saw me in person perform because he just saw me on video at the VHS. Time. Yeah, right. Cutting, pasting, putting the tape back over that little tab you break off, and started up the next season. And I don't know why at the time he chose me for this, but even before the season started, he asked if I would. He was doing some kind of course through the school, and I think it was through the University of Calgary, if I remember correctly, on how the brain works and how creativity works in the brain. And so he basically created a pas de deux, so me dancing with a female or someone else, and this is before the season started. I'd never worked with a guy before, and he chose me, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And so that was basically the start of my career with Alberta Ballet.
After high school? Were you done high school?
I finished, graduated high school.
This is like your first job?
Graduated and had the summer, went to the BAM Center and came home, moved to Calgary and started up. It was, luckily I keep going to the BAM Center because it really did prepare me for what company life was. As I got older in the festival dance program, they called it at the time, it was an environment where you worked like a company. You had your, it was a smaller group of dancers, and you worked with choreographers. We had the opportunity to do, some of the greats like Balanchine. We did a Balanchine piece every year. We had a new work every year. We remounted some historical works that Brian McDonald, who's the director of the program, some of his historical works. And it was just such a cool environment, and it really got you set up for what it was going to be like in the real world. And so, day one, I walked into the studio, found my bar spot. And luckily at the time, two other dancers that I had basically come up through the Banff Center with as well were also there. So, we had a little team, which was really, really nice because we had a support system.
How many people?
Each other. In the company at the time, I think there was 26, 27.
So like a bunch of personalities.
Yeah, definitely.
And different ages too?
Various ages. I had just turned 18.
Yeah.
And I think it went up to mid 30s. The company was older at the time, if I recall, late 20s, early 30s. So there's a lot of experience in the company at the time. And a bunch of them then retired the next few years. But I think that was what really got me to where I was. It was Jean at the time was very into just because you're young doesn't mean you can't do it. He would throw you in and see if you could sink or swim.
Yep.
And luckily I got the opportunity to do that. Our very first show was a mixed bill program, and it was two of Jean's pieces, a kind of smaller group piece, and this amazing pas de deux that I've still one of my favorite things to dance. And then a piece that the company had done in the past with another director who, Dominique Demena, she runs a company in Germany. And then a historical piece called Rodeo. I'll never forget the first week of work. I wasn't originally cast in this first group piece of Jean's. And it was 6 hours a day. That was all that they were rehearsing. I wasn't cast. I was like, thinking to myself, do I just not show up to work for the first week? It's so weird. So I was like, well, I'll just go in and learn it anyway. Well, it turns out I ended up being first cast because Jean saw me take the initiative, and I was standing in the back, I was doing it. And when someone was sick or injured, I was, he was like, who knows this part? I'd jump in and do it.
Did you know that would that would play out that way? Or you were just
you were doing
like,
what
I was
else
just
am I
going to do here? I'm here to work.
Happy-go-lucky young dancer who was eager to learn and was like, I think I need to do this, and so I did, and I think Jean saw that, and I got cast with the senior, most experienced females of the company alongside the most senior males of the company. And for the first, what new dancer? I mean, and this rarely happens. New dancer coming in. I never thought I was great by any stretch of the means. Jumping in and doing lead roles right from the get go is unheard of in so many companies. But like I said, it was a company that really fostered the art and a real family environment that I was able to show my potential. I was able to push past my limits of what I thought was possible. Yep. Even to this day, I still question, I know it sounds weird, but I still question my ability as a dancer or my talent. It's one of those industries where, you're just hacked down day in, day out, day in,
I can't imagine.
And there are times where, you do something good and you're thanked for that. But 90% of the time, it's like probably any artist. It's it's the criticism that makes you better. Yeah. It's not, you did this great. Okay, I'm just good.
Yeah.
But sadly nowadays it's terrible, but I feel like that's a lot of dancers nowadays. They don't want to put the work in. Yeah. They don't want the corrections because they think they're doing it good.
Different generation?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. I know that sounds so cliche,
but I think that's
really
everywhere
is,
now.
It really is. I think social media is a huge part of that. It's, what trick can I do now that's going to make me better than the next person? And that's not what art is. Yeah. Sorry, it just isn't. There's a place for that for sure. But going back to where I still question my ability. I still question, why did I get to do all those things? Why did people cast me in that? Why did people applaud for me?
Was that like your whole career?
Yeah.
That just like followed you?
Yeah.
And did that push you? Or was it just this like thing that was like scratching at you? Like, was it enough of a internal conversation that you just had to perfect it? You had to like work?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting now with the whole like mental health thing. It's not that I was in a bad mental health place by any stretch. It was just this thing that always hung over me, because you're always, I mean, this is something I've always said. You, as an artist, you're striving for perfection, knowing very well that it's unattainable. And why do we do that to ourselves? Why?
and not many people do it though, right?
No, and that's the thing.
That's what separates people that have done something at a professional level.
I was never a technical dancer by any means. And, all these dancers come in, could do incredible things, such incredible things. And I'd watch them like, man, I'm probably the least flexible dancer you'll ever meet. And now I understand why. I guess I did the things that I did because when I was young, and when you're young and you're training, it's all about the technique. It's all about what you can do physically.
Yep.
I mean, I'm going to pat myself on the back and my ego will speak up. I'm a damn good partner, and that's where I excelled. I would partner, these dancers who had been dancing the whole career around the world, who have danced with some of the best dancers in the world. And they would say I'm one of the best that they've worked with. And
is that attitude and skill set that kind of made that perfect?
Attitude is, to be honest, I think sits just a bit higher, because you can have all the ability in the world, but if someone doesn't want to work with you and someone says that you're not good to work with, I mean, it's like that in any walk of life. If someone was like, Jeff is doing this podcast, you're going to talk a lot, but it's terrible. Would I do it? Probably not. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's it's the same thing. You tell people to say that, he's incredible to work with, but he can also back it up. So I think it's a mix of both, but it's, if you're able to work with, I mean, I've always approached it, even when the odd time I've had to teach, it's a two-way street. It's never one or the other person's fault. And it may be, but at the same time, you're both going to fix this. It's never just, it's your fault, which there are a lot of partners out there that I've worked with.
I can't imagine.
But I've noticed that my mental approach to it sometimes has gotten them out of that. Because you're not going to get any better if you think you're the best, or you think it's somebody else's fault. It's, and I think that's, being a dancer, a male dancer specifically, I think being a partner is a huge, huge reason for that. Also, the time that I was with the company under the direction and leadership of Jean Garnet.
How long was it?
It's 20 years.
Wait, is that, I know nothing about your industry, but 20 years for one company seems like a serious run. It's a run.
It is. It's a very transient lifestyle in the sense of, if you're not happy with what you're doing, the career's so short that you go to a company where you want to do just something different, and or you want to work with somebody specific, and you're not going to do that here because it's Alberta, it's a small company. It's, if you want to do some of the big, great pieces, Kelley and whoever, you have to go to different companies. But I was challenged from the first day I walked into the day I left. And whether that was emotionally, artistically, physically, I just was. Jean had a knack for always finding a way to, whether I was in, finding a rut where I was like, this again, he'd always find a way to get a fire under my ass again. And whether that was helping him set his work, or assisting other dancers, or whatever, learning a new skill, like riding a one wheel on stage with sunglasses in the dark. Who knows? It was always one of those things. And I mean, and I say going back to, I still question my ability. there are so many dancers who cannot watch themselves. And I mean, it's normal, but there are a lot that still do, because that's how they think they're going to get better, is watching themselves. And it's a great way to do it.
Yeah.
For me, it put me in such a dark place. I'd watch it and be like, why did they let me do that on stage?
Because you were like, because what you're feeling,
all
and
you
thinking,
see, and sorry, go ahead.
no, but like, I'm sure it's like watching or hearing yourself or whatever. You're like, you have this. We don't have this perspective very often, where you see yourself and everything.
And you're
looks fucked
so
up.
exposed. You're so vulnerable.
I can't imagine.
But you only ever see your faults, your flaws, the things you're doing wrong, and you never see the positives ever. And then you realize that's all that people are seeing. And so, but it's so hard to wrap your head around, and that has dragged past into my post dancer life. The lack of confidence of your ability is bizarre. And I think it is being, a career where you got to have tough skin. You're constantly being told, you need to do that better. Oh, that person's doing it better. So step it up or whatever. It's weird how it's for someone who comes across as super confident all the time. And, obviously dancers are adrenaline junkies, because you wouldn't go out and expose yourself like that to an audience of 2,000 people. But I mean, obviously it's different than a Formula One driver, or it's just it's a different adrenaline, I guess. And like I said, that's where I've always like just thrived. But before a show, I'm questioning everything.
No way.
Oh yeah.
But you're like, you're trained up, inside out.
Well, this is the thing.
You've been doing it for years.
There's certain shows where I'm like, I should try this. I need to do this step a million times before the show. And I'm like, why? If I can't do it by now, you're not going to do it on stage. So just stop. Yeah. You still go through stuff. You still have your routines. I mean, dancers are so superstitious. So, you figure out something from day one for that show. It sticks for the run of the show. It's like, why? But it does. And the nerves, I mean, the older I got, the more nervous I got. And I don't know if that was expectation, if that was the need to never fail. Yet on the flip side of that, if I did screw something up, I was able to just go, it's done. Let's move on. Whereas when I was younger, I didn't have the fear of screwing up, but when I screwed up, that hung with me so much. Because
you weren't like solidified in your career. You like
maybe
like
must have been.
One little mess up could have sent you packing.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It's just interesting thing to think about. That now it's like the fear factor beforehand, before that curtain goes up, and then it's up, and I'm in it. Like
it just locked in.
But it's also because I got to a point in my career where I accepted my lack of technique, my lack of flexibility, my lack of, not that I stopped working at it, but I knew at that point that I'm not going to be like that dancer that I'm like trying to like, man, I wish I could do that, because there are 50 things that they can't do that I can do.
They're probably looking at you thinking the exact same thing.
And that's where, whether I mentally did it or not, that's where my focus went. I went and strengthened those other things to, I guess, not outshadow, but to really bring, the people in, almost like a magician in a way. It's like sleight of hand. It's like, look over here while I do something over here, in that sense where I was like, I can't get my leg up, but I'm going to give the, most emotion that I can out of this and make you feel it, and that was always my approach. And that, whether it was a character role, whether it was an abstract piece, there was always that artistry that was the focus. And that was Jean as well. I mean, Jean always said, you all can do the steps. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was like, your finger needs to be, a centimeter more that way.
So that is a thing.
Oh gosh,
it's down to like
centimeter. Such a thing. Okay. Which the irony of it is, he would hire a group of misfits. Like, we couldn't be more different. Yet he wanted us to do the same thing. But I understand now at an older age what he means. But he was always like, you can do the steps. I'm not feeling anything. I remember this moment of he asked me to set one of his pieces on at the company. At the time, the company had a small second student company, and he had me set one of the pieces on it on them. And so I set it. And the last day I was like, so can you come in and just work on it? And it's your work. And so he's like, yeah, sure. He can only come in for like an hour. And the beginning is just their arms are back and they're just walking on from the wings. And he probably spent about 20 minutes just in this walk on. But the emotion and the artistry he pulled out of these kids in 20 minutes, like I still don't really know what he said, what he did, but seeing that was like, it really changed my approach to how I would approach a role in the sense of standing on the other side of it, not being that person he's talking to doing it. Cause I think I was always doing what he wanted and he was pulling out what he wanted in me as a dancer. But when I was on the other side of it, standing in front with him, seeing the work from a different perspective and seeing how he brought that out in people was just like,
after all these years.
It was just incredible to see him turn these people, simple walking, into different creatures. It was wild. It was mind blowing. And so my approach was always like, okay, accept that you're not going to be that person over there. You're never going to be able to do that. So not that, like I said, not that I'm not going to stop trying, but my focus is going to go onto that artistry. It's going to go onto that partnering and that connection with people that I feel like I excel at on stage. It's that character that I can bring someone at the third second balcony at the last row and bring them in and feel like they're sitting right here with me. It was those things that later in my career, I really started to focus on because I really realized that that's what people want. It's such a selfish art form. Well, I guess all art is. You do it for yourself. But we do it for other people. If no one's there to watch, why are we doing it? I mean, I can dance by myself in the studio, great, but I leave the room and I'm like, hey, totally. But if someone sees me and feels something, that's what we do it for. And I realized that is why. They don't care. Alberta audiences don't care if my leg's up here. No,
if you're like, whatever you're,
If I'm not turned out as that guy next to me, if he's doing one more turn than I am, they don't care.
Nope.
They'll remember if you fall out of something because you're trying to do something you can't do. But it's how did I make them feel, and come to realize that's, speaking to people, that's what they remember of my performances. And that's where why they would come back. And of course, there was a technical aspect of it that I excelled at in the partnering things, I'll go see some dancing now and I'm like, I wish I just had 5 minutes with them, because the technical aspect of partnering, I'm able to just figure it out like that. But that was also the people that I worked with. It was also, these incredible artists that just allowed me to figure it out, and we figured it out together. That was so special. So
do you think anybody, if somebody would have told you that, to focus on kind of what you're good at and, understand that you have to keep working at the pieces that aren't your strengths, would that have calmed you down? Or would you have always just been like, just still in your head and be like, I don't think it would chase what I don't have?
No, because deep down, I still would have seen those other dancers and been like, I wish I could do that. I want to do it. I want to do it. And I still do that. I listen to certain songs. I'm like, man, if I had a piano, I'd just sit down and, pick up the piano again like I did when I was a kid. Or, and I have those thoughts. I'm like, I wish I could do that. I wish I could do it. I wish I could do that, And it's like, I know that a lot of people wish they could do what I did, but it's like, you never see that about yourself at all because what you do is what you do.
Yeah, that's
and,
it.
It's like, it's so bizarre.
You're in an interesting point in your life too, being retired.
Yeah.
And there's two things I'd love to get you going on. One is that not having that adrenaline piece. Maybe you do in a different spot in your life. Maybe it's a different level. It might be muted, whatever it is. But that piece, is that? And I'd love to hear your thoughts around just the what next. I know this isn't the right place to really get into it.
But it is, you know what I mean? If you can't talk about it to well, people you just met or whatever. I mean, it's the adrenaline. Gosh, I mean, well, okay. For example, I was nervous coming in to do this today.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I don't know. I'm just talking about myself.
Mm-hmm. But you know, to some we've never met before. We've talked on email. Never met. Your lights, camera.
I mean, I was in a silent art form for 20 years. So
yeah, yeah. So this is a change.
Maybe I should just have done an interpretive dance the whole time. I don't know.
We'll get you back to do that one.
No, I don't know. It's one of those things. I think it's still one of those performance fears still, maybe. I don't know.
It's also one of just probably
that's followed me. Yeah, it's bizarre. I don't know where I'll get the adrenaline rush again.
Do you think you need it, it might come from somewhere else that you haven't quite figured out yet?
I think it will come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And whatever facet that is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because funny enough, it was driving here. I'm a huge F1 fan, and driving here made me think of the adrenaline and being an adrenaline junkie. And I was like, I guess I kind of am as an artist because you're literally going on stage, exposing yourself. I mean, I'm going on stage wearing nothing, and I mean, we're vain people as dancers. We literally are staring at ourselves in a mirror all day, and all we do is work out all day from 8 or 9 in the morning till 6:15 at night. And then you go home and you're doing other stuff. And to make your body look, because it's your instrument. Yep. And, which is also interesting being in the world of body acceptance and body image right now, because it's like, I still am always going to try to do things to keep my body in that state because I mean, I feel great, but I just feel like that's what I need to look like, which is bizarre.
That's what you know.
Because it's been my instrument for my whole life, you know? Yeah. And so it's funny enough, the whole adrenaline thing, it was driving here today that I thought about it. And I was like, it's really interesting that is how I get it, you know? And I never thought of it that way at all, even when I was dancing. I think I'll still need it for sure.
Do you think it'll creep into your life in whether you're giving back in a certain way, whether it's whatever your next career move is, and you get like the high of either closing something or doing something?
I was going to say, I think it's going to be a high that I'm going to need to get from something else. Yeah. And you know what? I think it's going to be the children too. Yeah. You know, you watch them do things, you watch them play sports, you watch them dance or whatever. And I think it's going to be a different kind of adrenaline, but I feel like it's going to be there for sure. Yeah. And like I said, it's all pure speculation for sure. I mean, and that kind of ties into retirement. You know, what am I going to do? I have no idea. I don't know. I've dipped my toes into a couple things, like we were talking about earlier. I did a little video editing, which I really enjoyed. I'm a patient person. It's attention to detail. It's creative. But is that something I want to do? I don't know. You're
just going to test, you think, for a while?
I think I have to. Yeah. I mean, how I was never a person that was. Let me go back. There are a lot of dancers who, I don't want to say they weren't invested. They were. They're invested 100%. But they always had a foot out the door. They always had something else. They always were training, thinking about their future. And there's nothing wrong with that. I am not judging that at all. Yep. I just was never that type of person. I was always, I am all in.
You're in.
If you're not all in, you're not focused, you're not doing the job at hand, then what are you here for? You know, you're not doing the job you've been paid to do. And now I was never we call them bunheads in the sense of when I'm away from work, all I do is watch ballet. All I do is watch dance. I'm training. No. When I was away from dance, I lived my life. Because that is what brought, I think, my ability to connect with people. Yeah. It allowed me to be characters on stage, whether it was Romeo, it was my Romeo. It wasn't somebody else's Romeo that I watched do that is, you know, Nuryev's Romeo or someone else's. That was me. And it was my life experiences outside of dance that allowed me to connect with you. And so many dancers don't do that. They are so invested and they're watching dance and they are bunheads through and through. and I see how it's halting their artistry. And I don't know if they don't see it that way, but they're not experiencing life.
So they have nothing drawn.
No. And so that was my focus my entire career. And so I never did anything else. I never focused on, of course you have interests. That's completely different. But I was never, I'm going to train to do something else. I'm going to focus on something else. It's interesting. We've always, dancers have a fund that you can pay into called the Dancers Transition Resource Center. And it basically, if you pay into it your career, you apply for grants and it will cover your retraining and whatever you want to do.
Interesting.
And I paid into it, but I may use it, I may not.
Yeah.
But it was one of those weird things to me where I was like, so many dancers would use it when they're dancing. And I'm like, how can you think about something other than what we're doing right now? Like, this should be your 100%. This should be everything.
Yep.
And I think that's also why I succeeded to
it makes you different.
Be the person who I was in the company and in my career. And allowed me to connect with people. So because of that, for 20 years, I don't want to just go, yeah, you know what? I really like this video editing thing. I'm going to fly with it. Yeah. Because how do you go from doing something you're so passionate about for 20 years and go, I have to find something else that I'm going to be passionate about?
Well, especially in like 3 or 4 months. Like,
well, that's just it.
There's a runway here.
And the government tells me I only have 3 or 4 months, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you. But it's one of those things where, there are bad days, like.
I can't imagine.
Days where you're like, what am I doing with my life?
They go away.
They do.
But it's that shitty cliche time.
Oh, yeah.
But that doesn't help anybody ever.
No. And it's so funny because during the summer months when I know I had, the next dance season, I would take all the time off in the world. I wouldn't dance a day, 2 months of fun, yard work, whatever. Now, if I take like an afternoon, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with myself?
I'm behind.
And it's so bizarre.
Nobody talks about this though, hey?
No, not at all.
This is, like I said off camera, gold medalists, pro athletes, pro dance, like that. The end is when.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's like a piece of you is missing, and you're like, how do you fill that void? I don't want to still be a dancer. I am very happy that I chose to retire when I retired. And there's a million reasons why. I wanted to spend more time with my kids because the schedule was just crazy. The company was going in a different direction with the new vision of the company, and that wasn't for me. I was always going to be transitioning into being in the artistic staff in the front of the room. I had numerous people pushing me that way and grooming me that way because that's where my skill set would really, really succeed. Setting ballets and that kind of thing. But that didn't happen. And it's not that I'm upset about that at all, but it's the small dance world in this city, this province, this country. Unfortunately, there's nowhere really else for me to do that in the capacity that I want to do it. So not saying that I wouldn't do it in the future, but I know it's bad because so many people have a life where they go, I don't like my job, but I'm still doing it. I make money.
There's
a lot of people. Yeah. And I'm sure that they, roll their eyes when I go, how am I going to find another job? Because it has to be another career that I'm passionate about. When you have that for your whole life, how do you not have that for the rest of your life? It's a blessing and it's a curse in the sense of being a dancer. You have a job that you're so passionate about, but you're then at a point where you have to find something else that you're passionate about.
Well, you've kind of reached your pinnacle spot, what you want to do.
Yeah. And if I go into something else, the hard pill to swallow is you're going to start at the bottom. When I was at the top, and not that I don't have that fight in me anymore, or that drive, but it's just like,
it's different.
What did I do it all for? I did it for myself for sure. I did it for the audiences that saw me. But I think I know all past dancers have said this, you just have to have the time. Take the time. Time is the key word. But
it sucks
so
to hear it, though.
hard. It's so hard because you're like, I need to know now. I need to know now what I'm going to do. Because it's like, I don't want to waste this time. They're precious years. They're precious hours. But, and the fear, like I said, that's continued to hang over me of failure. As a dancer, you're always striving for perfection, and dancers aren't the type of people who will go into something that they're not qualified for and be okay with, I got the job. So, if I can't do it and, I fail a couple times, it's not a big deal. I'll get there.
It's not the attitude. No, that doesn't work.
I can't help it.
Gets you nowhere.
But it's putting up roadblocks mentally for me to go, I can't apply for that job. I don't qualify. They need this degree, they need that degree, they need this years of experience and this many years of blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it scares me away because I'm like, I can't do that. I can't do that at all.
But you can.
And I know everybody tells me that.
It's, you almost said like word for word what Katrina Maydon said.
Huh.
Her resume wouldn't get her in anywhere. She wasn't confident to go anywhere.
No, and that's the thing. You talk to so many people who are like, your soft skills, your transferable skills, you have so many. But as dancers, everybody has those. They're not skills. They're requirements. And so it's a really hard thing to wrap your head around in the real world to know that those are skills. Those are transferable skills. But how do I write those down in a cover letter or a resume and tell people that, being like, oh yeah, I saved the company's ass and saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars because I took initiative and stepped up and did all these roles. And they're like, okay, great. I'm a team worker. Well, how do you show me that? I literally worked in a dance company. Like I had to make out with people on stage. I have to, you know what I mean? Like, is that an odd team player? I don't know. It's how do I articulate that to the business world or to, so, and time,
it's time. And if I were to guess, it's going to be a connection, whatever that degree of separation is. Somebody's going to know somebody's going to know you that understands exactly all the soft skills that you have. Yeah.
And I've had so many people in my life, like Paul, for example. He, if he's got a shoot that he's like, yo, come and give me a hand. And, just to see if, is this something you want to do?
Yeah, totally.
And there's been so many wonderful people that I've met through, whether they've been supporters of the ballet, donors, board members, past dancers, friends who have stepped up and were like, let's talk, whether it is about anything specific, they're there to support and help. Totally. And I mean, I'm so grateful for that. It's been, it's still a journey. It's going to continue.
It's just like whatever version 2 part, whatever you want to coin it.
Exactly.
It's just the next move. It's been really cool, man.
Yeah.
We could go on, obviously. There's only, the way I always end this, I ask one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Oh gosh, a million places. Funny, I was watching a podcast with Paul and he said home. I mean, home encapsulates it all, but I mean, it's so much more than that. It's, opportunity, it's love, passion, inspiring, friendship. This was the place that I've now lived longer. I said that the dance world is a very transient place. And most dancers who come in, where they work, so, the ones that are currently here in Calgary, Calgary's not home. Even though they may have lived here for 14 years, Calgary's not home. Because home is where they grew up and that will always be their home, which of course it is for me as well. But it's just so different because dancers aren't in companies for 20 years. They rarely are. There's very few that are. And that makes it your home. But it's, it's where I got my first job. It's where, Jean gave me my first opportunity. It's where I got married. It's where I had kids. It's where I spent 20 years of my life meeting the most incredible people, doing the one thing I love to do. Calgary is a place that took me around the world. It took me to China. It took me to Thailand. It took me to Russia. It took me, everywhere. So it's, it's beauty. Going running this morning, it's just, you look out at, the fields and It's
my
mind-blowing,
backyard.
Yeah. An hour to Kananaskis, going for an incredible hike. It's stunning. I don't know. It's a million things. It's been my life. It's been who I am. It's turned me into who I am. And I'm so grateful I've had the chance to live here and be here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Super cool, man. Like I started off, this was the one show that I've been really wanting to get to. So you did not disappoint.
No, thank you.
This was really, really cool to sit down with you and hear your story. So thanks for taking the time.
This was, it was interesting talking about it because you go through things in your head. You're like, oh yeah, I'll touch on this. I'll talk about that. Oh yeah, I played the nose flute. You know what I mean? But it's amazing what you're going, what comes out, and
well, yeah,
it's like a therapy session.
Well, and the some of the past guests, it's like this is like a time capsule,
mm-hmm.
which will be very interesting when you're like in version 2.0 and you're whatever path you're on, to have this piece.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And the cool thing is, if whenever you get to where you're going to be, it'd be cool to have you back, in like episode 100, 175, and just to like
perspective on how that was. And yeah, definitely.
So, yeah. Anyways, thanks again. This was really, really cool.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.